This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. So Lucy Batley from All Women Welcome, which is a platform to help elevate women into leadership positions. Tell us about yourself. Why did you start this?
So my background is branding. I'm a branding expert. I've also got a tech company, but a series of misadventures we were talking about before. A series of things happened over an 18-month period during COVID, which led me to set up All Women Welcome, which is to help elevate all women in business, but particularly to try and equal the gap at the top in terms of leadership. Okay
then, and why do you think that's necessary? Tell us your, without going into the 18-month journey.
Yeah.
What was your view before, and why do you now think differently after?
My journey with it started about 5 or 6 years ago. I was asked to sit on two boards, equality and diversity boards, one with Newcastle University Business School. So I was aware of sexism and misogyny and things that were going on. I thought it wasn't anything to do with me. And in fact, 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a black tie dinner with, sat next to Dr. Nicola Patterson, when we were chatting, and I actually said, I'm not a feminist, just before you carry on.
Which we nearly called this episode,
which we nearly called.
We didn't want to get accused of clickbaiting, I think, is there?
Correct. And what I meant by that, I was totally taken to task about it. And what I meant by it was that I firmly believe that men and women are equal, but that we are different. I've completely changed me thinking about this. And to answer your question, it's very prevalent at the minute. We're making progress, but we're still not there. There's loads of evidence that there's not enough diversity in companies.
Because the UK is still one of the most welcoming, one of the most diverse and accepting, I think, societies in the world. But to think it's all done is a mistake, isn't
absolutely.
it? And my journey on this is probably similar to you. I used to think, because I don't think I know anyone who's an outward misogynist in any way. I honestly don't think I do. I mentioned there was one comment years ago I heard from someone about, well, this is why we don't employ women, because you get pregnant all the time. Which never made sense to me, because they're normally men's babies. And surely you want your wife, your mother, your daughter to get looked after during pregnancy. So that didn't make sense to me. But then, for me, I kind of, and we'll come on to this later, but I read a book, which is something I also recommended to you. I just, there's an off-the-hand comment. I went, oh, you need to read this book. And that changed a lot of my thinking.
It massively changed my thinking as well. So,
but you'd already kind of been nudged into this journey, hadn't you?
The nudge into the journey was that, and we were talking about before, that until it kind of happens to you directly, and that it was a career-damaging event that happened to me, you're kind of blissfully unaware of it, and I'm absolutely guilty of being ignorant. And having read particularly the book, just to do a plug for the book, it's called Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, get her name right.
We'll put a link in there.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, and it's very much about equality, but as we were talking about, there's also some like really interesting case studies about how structures, and there's a lot of good examples of
to summarise it, I mean, the simple example on here is, I didn't realise that for many years, all of the crash test dummies were based on the average man.
Yeah.
It's like a 5'11",
and things like telephones are designed for men's hands, so they're too big for women's hands.
Pocket. It's just like, and it sounds really simple, and everyone's heard, well, if you'd asked a woman. But the reality is, for many years, businesses, these decisions were made by men who, I think even after reading the book, weren't purposely excluding women from it, but were, because of the very nature of people, thinking, well, this is what I would want, so that's what we'll have. And transport's another great thing. The idea that you had people commuting into a central hub to
because
work,
that's where the banks and the city and
then
the finance was.
So that's why all trains run in and out. I mean, I know you've got the tube and the metro now and things like that, but that's not the journey that a primary caregiver takes on the way into work. They drop 2 kids off at 2 different schools, drop the baby off at the mother. Well, that doesn't fit in with bus routes or metro routes. And it wasn't done on purpose. I just think it was done in an ignorant way. Now, I'm always cautious about using ignorant because I think it sounds like an insult. I'm using it in the sense of just weren't aware.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
It's lack of lack of awareness.
You just didn't know about it. And I was definitely in that camp.
I was in that category. I'll confess that I was absolutely in that category. So I used to say things like, I'm a business owner, it's a man and a woman, 50-50 partnership. I wouldn't put up with this. However, in hindsight, there were things that didn't realise. That I didn't realise that it's called unconscious bias, and there's things that I could have done differently while I was at that company.
So again, you weren't a misogynist, surely, but
I might have been.
Your ignorance of it might have helped to implement policies which actually
Exactly.
Which again, I've been doing that for years. And so let's just, how big do you think this problem is then? Because you mentioned thirds.
It's massive in terms of there's evidence that a third of men are sort of total sexist, misogynist. A third of men are feminists or are supportive of equality and diversity, and then there's a third that are just blissfully ignorant or unaware of either what they should be doing or that they're actually
or the impact
of what their decisions are making.
So that was probably me. I'm definitely not against women, don't think. But you never know. You don't know now in hindsight, do you? When you read this book, you think, actually, have I done some of these things? But I think I was unaware. I'm now wide awake because of this book. I wouldn't say I was an active feminist campaigner, but I am a lot more aware.
I think for me, what was really interesting about the book is that it's all evidence-based. So there's loads of data in it and stats. And I know stats can be manipulated. You know that being an accountant. But
we don't manipulate stats.
But
we present them in the best light.
I know you can do that, but the book is all evidence-based. That's why it kind of really made me open my eyes and think. It's about thinking, being more conscious of what you're doing and what you're saying.
That's an interesting point because it was clearly so evidence-based. For me, it appealed to my mind rather than just a rally cry to the heart. Yeah. But actually, because it ended up being something I'm now quite passionate about. Hence the reason I said, you've got to read this book, And
it's very accessible as well. It's not kind of a stuffy academic book, which is difficult to read. It's very, very well written, and the cases are presented brilliantly. But as I say, it's backed up with factual evidence, but also these brilliant case studies of what we're doing right. So you mentioned before about maternity leave. We're way behind Europe in terms of they have parental leave, which is something that we're not very good at in England. So things like that need to change, but that's kind of big picture stuff in terms of policy changes.
Because it's quite hard as well because these things, to be blunt, cost money, don't they? So then bringing this round to why we're here, what's the business case then? Why is it important that this is solved? Without this being, because I'm very conscious here, we'll have, I don't know what our audience is, but I would imagine there's a lot of men watching this thinking, why are they talking about this crap?
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly. But there's a business case here, isn't there, after all?
So the best one that I like quoting is there was a McKinsey study, a report 2019, so quite a recent one, and they proved that companies, they study I think 1,000 companies, sort of top level companies over 15 different countries, and they proved that the more diverse the companies were, they were 25% more likely to be profitable than those with very few women in them. So that's evidence, that's fact.
Because on average, half of all consumers or customers of a business's product are going to be women. Yeah. And there'll be some that are heavily women and some that never sell to women just because of, bias and preference. But half of all the buying is done for or by women, isn't it?
So that's the business case, and then the social case is that it's
just look after your people.
Well, it's 50% of the population is women. Look after everybody. Look after everyone. Yeah, it's about and people. One of the issues that I get is men very often say to me, "Oh, we're not over this now. It's 2022," and I keep saying, "Yes, we're making progress, but we're not there yet." and until it is equal, and all the things about the gender pay gap, etc., we're getting there, but there's still a lot to be done.
So the business case, if we can get it right, there's again evidence to show that the more diverse your board, your management levels are, your leadership teams are,
the more profitable you're going to be. And who doesn't want more cash?
If you're not in business for money,
exactly.
Then you're a charity. Because that sounds pretty crude the way I said it, but everyone wants money, rightly or wrongly. I know it's the root of all evil and all that, but you only go to work to make money. So if the business is more profitable, you can pay your team more, you can provide the nicer things that people want from work.
It's about having different perspectives, isn't it? Women and men have got very different perspectives. So it's about making sure that everybody's included.
So how do we do that then? Because we've got these thirds, and it seems to me that if
we can change
if you've
the
got
balance.
a third who are neutral, unbothered, I'm not saying unbothered, but are ignorant to it and unaware, a third actively support, a third actively against. If we can shift that, if we can turn one of those thirds into a 2/3 group of eyes open, fully aware, that feels like it would tip the balance enough to get this going, doesn't it?
For me, the important bit is a massive education piece. We both said we've learned loads from this book. I think everybody in the world should read this book. It should be
in the world. You go that far?
Yeah, I would.
So, which brings us on to an interesting point. But I'll let you finish yours first.
I think for me, the biggest thing is about education. And like you said, I wasn't aware of it until something happened to me, and I'm sure most people are just going around blissfully ignorant of what's going on. And like I say, I know we keep raving on about this book, but it is very accessible, and it's not just about the ranting feminist.
Some of these things are very simple as well.
Yeah, very simple solutions.
Because, like it or not, the majority of primary caregivers are the women in a relationship. So even basic things.
I think something like 70% of unpaid work is women.
And a lot of that is caregiving, whether it's elderly relatives or kids.
Or people who are sick.
Which is often done outside of work time by the nature of kids being at school during the working day largely. So then, something very simple for us was, it blew my mind. It was so simple. It was like, why do we keep having social events on an evening then? When women are less likely to be able to come. So it's like, we could say, well, of course everyone's invited. That's equal. But if you're less able to accept that invite because you've got other things to do, well, that in itself, it wasn't an equal offer, was it? Yeah. So we've now consciously started to try to do more stuff during the working day, which eats into the time where we're charging out our time, but it means everyone's got a fair crack at attending.
Include people and speak to them. Ask the women in the company what they want. And by including everybody, you're going to get, as I said, you're going to get different perceptions, and people will tell you what they want. It's about being supportive. Everything we're trying to do with All Women Welcome is about supporting women. I'm told I'm not allowed to use the word help because we don't need to be helped. We need to be supported.
You mentioned something before as well, then, and I can't remember the exact thing you said, but you mentioned this education point. It's not just men, though, is it?
No, it's women. It's women as well.
Because this was something you said, I want to make sure I mention this.
Yeah.
Something that surprised you a lot.
So since we launched, which was only a few months ago, the biggest surprise I've had is female misogyny. So women in leadership roles blocking other women while they're trying to progress their careers. It's absolutely blown my mind. I was expecting a lot of kickback from men, particularly when we launched online. We didn't get that. We had a lot of support for it. We call them men allies, and the more men allies we can get, the easier it's going to be to tip that balance of the thirds. But the thing that really took me aback was the female misogyny that's absolutely rife. And my business partner, who's an academic, just about to release a paper where there's evidence that particularly in the northeast, there's a lot of women blocking other women, and I think it's purely down to competition. The northeast is quite competitive anyway, and because there's so few women in the leadership roles, they're kind of jostling about trying to stop each other getting there.
Because that's not necessarily misogyny. It's just
It's not the individual. It's a construct in terms
is it kind of, well, you know, I'm one of the only women managers anyway. I don't want another
Exactly.
one. They've got one. They don't need two.
And I suspect the women doing it are very blissfully unaware that they're doing it as well. It's born out of fear. It's born out of fear that they've struggled so hard to get to the top that they're trying to stop other women getting there because there's not enough positions in leadership roles.
Because I'm sure men block men.
I'm sure they do.
Probably not because they're men. It might be, I don't like Dave. I don't want to be on a board with Dave, or I don't want to be in a leadership team with Dave because you just don't like Dave. But it's probably not because Dave's a man. Does the evidence bear out that
it's more likely
the
that
sex comes into it more?
It's more likely that men both. The surprise bit is that it's men and women blocking women getting, particularly in large corporates.
And do you think that's because the pattern of corporate life is less forgiving for primary caregivers? So it's like, well, we can't put Lucy on the board because she'll not be able to go to the weekend retreats because she's got kids.
Or do you
think they're not even thinking that?
I think they're not even thinking that. I think it's more to do with since the dawn of time, the default's always been that the leadership roles are for men. And that it's the men that go to war. It's the men that are
we don't get all the good stuff.
Yeah, I know.
We carry most bricks up ladders as well, and we mine more. So it's not all a one-way tide. Which actually goes back to, you kind of said, well, let's just treat everyone fairly. We should all have an equal crack, but we have to accept we are also different.
Yeah,
it's about accommodating the differences, isn't it?
Yeah. So my phrase, instead of saying I'm not a feminist, which is not wrong, that was born out of ignorance, is that we are all equal and we should be treated equally, but we have to accept and embrace differences.
Because like my point there on the socials, an equal offer, well, everyone was invited, isn't an equal offer if it can't be accepted by everyone in the same way.
Because they're not from the same circumstances.
Do you think we're in the middle of... Because obviously COVID has forced a lot of home working, a lot of things have changed. Do you think the working environment post-COVID has changed and changing as it still is helping this or hindering this? I
think COVID's been very detrimental for women because they've had to been forced to go down the childcare route
because the
schools were closed. Something that I've got a real personal beef about is domestic violence statistics went through the roof.
Right.
I think they tripled. There was
nowhere to go.
There was nowhere to go, and there was no support for them, and that was not reported in the media at all, or very little.
It's interesting, yeah.
There you go. You've not heard about it. I think the figures are mind blowing. It's something like
why do you think that was? Again, do you think that was covered up because it's only women, or we better not say get out of the house because we're telling people to stay in the house? We don't know, do we?
I think it's covered up because it's the men that are doing it, and it's the men that are running the media, basically.
So it's right, okay.
It was rife, and the real personal bugbear of mine was that was just not reported on. Suicides went up as well. People were trapped, people were isolated. There's going to be huge mental health issues as a result of COVID.
I think this is going to run for a hell of a long time.
I agree.
Which also, I think, not just supporting women and being, more open and diverse, etc. I think you've just got to be more accommodating to your teams. And I don't want to use a negative word, but people have got more baggage now. Yeah. Emotionally.
I think you've got it.
I think if you expect... So we did an episode with a guy called Paul Cheetham a while back. And one of the really interesting things he said is you don't want people to leave their emotions at the door. You need emotion in business. You need passion, enthusiasm. You can't switch off one emotion but expect your others to fire. And I think people have just got more baggage than ever. Yeah. You've got people who are still afraid to leave the house because they've been told for 2 years not to leave the house or you'll die.
Some people never stop wearing a mask.
You've got some people who never stayed in the house who are now ostracised because, there's so much fallout that's going to happen for years here. I think it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah. I think, and we were talking about what can we do about this.
Well, yeah, so let's get on to that. Education, you think, is one of the key things.
Education is a massive piece for me, and we're doing a lot of content and trying to get that out there so that we can target different levels.
Who needs that education then?
Everyone.
So again...
And it's got to start from kids.
Young.
Really young kids.
Change the pattern
Yeah,
at the start.
change the patterns.
So what is your educational style here then, Lucy? Is it... 'Cause in my ignorant years, of which that was the majority of my life, by the way, that was my first 43 years of life were ignorant. Probably 3 years since I read the book, I was like, oh, hold on, that's interesting. It felt like for the 43 years of ignorance, it was like women just going like, just make sure you tell girls they can be astronauts. It's like, but they can, they're all women astronauts.
I know, but if you asked 50 kids, boys and girls, to draw pictures of astronauts.
Oh no, this is
sure most of them draw men rather than
draw
women.
A doctor, you'll draw a man.
Yeah.
And I think that's starting to tweak a little bit, but it, yeah.
Like I say, there's progress is happening. It's just far too slow, And
so what is the education though?
I think
because you can't just, again, if you just go in schools and say you can be an astronaut, that's not the problem, is it? The problem is the preconception about what you can and can't.
I think it's a communication thing. It's about listening to people, but it's about having these sorts of conversations. And I think it's brilliant
being
open and honest and talking about it. And and I was slightly hesitant that you might not want to do this as a topic today. And I think it's absolutely brilliant that you do, and I know that you're doing lots to address the diversity within your own business, which is brilliant.
We're certainly trying.
Yeah. And the more people that make noise about it, and the more people that are talking about it and do things like this, then the more that the word's going to spread. Yeah. But for me, I keep going back to the business case. If there's business evidence from a McKinsey report that the companies are much more profitable if they've got a diverse board level, but also right across the company.
So
you can't argue with that.
But I'm very conscious that in our top level leadership team we have one woman and the rest are men. I think that is a historic thing that has to change.
Yeah.
Because if we look at our employees as a whole, I don't know the stat on this, but it feels like we've got a lot more women in here than we have men. And the natural progression in accountancy is, you train, you qualify, you become a manager, one of the managers becomes the next director. So I think that it's a timing issue for us. We can't just go, well, we need a director to be a woman, so pick any woman and make her a director. So I think that will come. And I also feel like a lot of the professions are, again, most solicitors I know now seem to be women as well. More of the senior partners are still men. But that's because 20 years ago, the management level were men.
Yeah, so this is the point of women welcome is to elevate the women into to support them, to help get them into those positions. I feel like it's coming,
but also you've probably still got a lot of male leadership teams who kind of go, well, who are we going to have? And even though they might have 6 female managers and two male managers, somehow they'll pick, they'll go, oh, we'll have Dave. Because it's like
it's a complex issue, and it's not as you don't get in a position where you're having positive bias against.
You can't put the wrong person in a role.
Exactly.
But you've got to make sure that
it's a very complex issue.
It's
a bit about giving people a fair crack.
Because if you say, well, this is the expectation from someone at partner level in a firm of solicitors, you've got to be able to go to 3 retreats a year, you've got to entertain people 4 nights a month, and then you go, I'm not sure I want that anyway, because I can't. You've got to be careful that how you grade people's performance has to take those things into account, which is what this book opened my eyes completely on. Like really powerfully, well, that's why they never go to the networking events, because they can't. It's like, right, okay, well, we should really not have that as a metric.
Or change the times of the networking events.
But then even internally, we've got people going, but why is this in the afternoon? It's right in the middle of the working day. It's like, well, but so people can come. We're inviting women who wouldn't come if it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And we've got women here we want to be at it who couldn't be there. So that's why it's in the middle of the day. And people aren't resisting, they're not going, well, it's not happening, we're doing it. But you can feel the pressure on it. It's really strange.
Yeah. I think things like the Me Too movements kind of brought it more into the consciousness, which has massively helped. But yeah, we've still got a long way to go.
Do you think though, Lucy, as well, is, we talked about these thirds, and I'm just taking for read the thirds are there. The third then not actively hate, but the third of active misogynist men, let's just say. I don't know if that's what you classify that group as, but...
Can I add something again, going back to the blissfully unaware bit? I knew that it was a problem until I got involved in this particular venture, which started several years ago. I didn't realise how rife it was.
Right.
It is absolutely rife, particularly in the bigger organisations where you can hide from it. And some of and out confidentially, I can't discuss it, but some of the horror, I've heard some absolute horror stories.
Do you think then, because I'm very conscious, if you pick any contentious topic, look at American politics, the Trumpers were so pro-Trump, it didn't matter what he did, but the anti-Trumpers were so anti-Trump, it doesn't matter how bad Biden is. Like, they're both pretty poor, I would say, but neither will argue the other has any good points or that their own man has any bad points. Do you think this kind of the Me Too movement, it brought it into the mainstream, but do you think it actually converted anybody? Or do you think
I'll tell you what's more interesting. If you go back a step and look at the Hillary Clinton story, that is fascinating.
Well, because Clinton was accused of just banging on about women.
Yeah, and she
but
wasn't.
Then there's been analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
She basically never mentioned it, did she?
Exactly.
If anything, she didn't mention it enough, which is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. If you read some of the evidence about that, it's quite mind-blowing.
I've seen some on that, I can't remember where it was now, but I've seen some on that. Yeah, if you they've analysed their speeches.
That's about power, isn't it? That's about power and influence.
So where was that narrative from then? Because I can't remember now whether they looked at how many times Trump accused
They did some analysis.
Or was it the media report?
It was both. It was they did analysis of it was the media reporting. That was what swung it. But the analysis was I think it was of the social media comments and and then they did an analysis of the speeches and what she was actually saying. And word for word, it was mind blowing. Trump was way more anti-women than Clinton was, but yet she was accused of it.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
But that's how things are manipulated, and this is why the education piece needs to happen. And it's about communication.
But so education earlier.
Yeah, much earlier from schools.
It feels to me like it's got to be different though.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like I'm making this point very well. I don't think standing in front of a room full of kids and going, "You can all be astronauts." I don't think that's getting it.
I think that's
been doing that for years.
I think that's exactly. It's not about that. It's school teachers, particularly primary school teachers, are doing things. So they're asking the boys questions more than the girls, and it's completely unconscious.
But are primary school teachers are they not primarily female?
Exactly. Yes, they are. This is what I'm saying.
So that's a surprise to me.
This is the one that's the surprise for me, that it's women that are doing it as much and if not more than men, but they're unaware of it.
So that's just conditioning, isn't it?
So it is conditioning. It's social conditioning.
Yeah.
Because
it's like a Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've probably misused that, but it's like, well, we're trapped in it now. Oh no, you shouldn't get high hopes. It's like,
yeah, but it's that. It's always my mother put my brother will kill me for saying this. My mother always put me brother on the pedestal, and I was the black sheep of the family, and that is just social conditioning.
I
That's how it was.
But I hear he's much nicer, and I hear he's far superior to you in every way. But that's just what I hear.
That it's just social conditioning, because that's the way it was. The blokes went out and got the jobs, and the women stayed at home.
We've still got clients who are still clients. Not so much these days, but we've got legacy clients from. Gotta be careful how I say this. We've got clients where when they pass on the family business, it just goes to the
automatically
son.
The son, because that's the way it has been since the dawn of time.
But just to give balance here, mind you, probably one of our larger clients, certainly not our largest clients, but a very large client of ours, the eldest son was also massively preferred over even the second eldest son. So although there's two brothers and a sister, the second brother and sister were ignored equally as well. It's just the eldest son got it. So I'm sure this goes on with men. I'm not making the case here that what about men? But there's a lot of funny things that are in there for historical reasons, which will take time to change. I think they just will. So you've mentioned as well, your big surprise there. What else can businesses do then? Because the McKinsey report says 25% boost. We all want a bit of that. Are there any other simple things we can do to just...
There's a lot of evidence about going back to kind of job adverts. So there's a good example where a job advert... So, for example, a job advert that had a salary in put the women up from applying for it because they didn't think that they were good enough for that salary. And then the same advert went out without the salary on it and more women applied for it.
I
simple
mentioned
things
this because
like that.
LinkedIn now is full of people going, put the damn salary on.
Yeah.
I'm like, but there's research. It's not just that people don't want to put the salary on. There's actually research that people don't apply for jobs they don't think they're good enough for, but they are good enough.
It's the wording. It's using words like we're looking for, an ambitious, etc., etc., etc. So it's about language is really, really important, and that's something I've learned in terms of an education piece. Things like we shouldn't use the word ladies. We have Ladies' Day, and I battled against this. Why not? And but if you look at it, it's a derogatory term, and it's referring back to Victorian times. The ladies go in the ladies' parlour, and the men go in the other room for a cigar. So that's again the social conditioning. So language is really, really important.
It's interesting. Is that why social clubs have ladies weren't allowed in the
men
bar?
and women were separated.
I remember you had the bar and the lounge.
Yeah.
And there's still, I don't know if there's still golf clubs that don't allow female members.
Well, I won't name it. Exactly. I won't name names, but there's a club in town that only allowed women in about 2 years ago.
Wow.
So there's a lot of kind of old school stuff that's still going on.
Yeah. Okay then. So language is key. I mean, where do people learn about this? This is where you can plug yourself if you want. I presume this is the kind of thing you're trying to help with.
So one of the things that we've set out to do is provide a lot of content. So we're doing a lot of blogs, which is kind of an obvious thing to do. I'm going out talking about things like this. It's just about getting people to, and we're trying to do it in a bit of a quirky way so that it's more interesting, that people take notice of it.
Yeah.
But
because dull doesn't it might be an important topic,
but it just
shuts
people. It just shuts people down. And you said it before that men will go, not blooming women ranting on about blooming women again, and we've got to kind of get over that.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer to this. It's just you've just got to kind of keep chipping away.
Do you think time will inevitably solve these things?
I think I think it's going to speed up now, and I think women are going to fight back, and it's going to. We're starting to see more women supporting more women. It's something that I've done all the way through my career, and I intend to do more of now. Yeah. Well, this is the whole point of doing. I've always been supportive of people in business. All businesses have problems, all people have problems, and they need support at one time or the other. And you need different types of support for different types of
support for different types of problems.
Yeah, and we've identified that women need a different type of support to men. So I know from past experience where I've sat in rooms, if there's 20 women and one man, the women will speak differently. And then in the toilets afterwards, the women will go, I wish I'd said this or I wish I'd said that. And they haven't because they didn't want to because there was a man sitting there. So it's not about excluding men, it's about the women
giving
behave.
Everyone a voice.
It's not, it's more that it's so our platform's for everybody. But it's designed by women and specifically targeted at women because I believe that they need a different kind of support.
It's interesting that we did an episode, I can't remember when now, James can remember, but it was about being voice confident with Helen. Do you know Helen? Helen Ingham?
No.
Or she was a parent at the school. It doesn't matter. So Helen is a voice coach, a therapist, but she also does confidence training. And she made the point that, paraphrasing, sorry Helen if I get this wrong, but that people who are maybe a bit shy or less confident might not speak out in a
They won't speak out, they won't go for the jobs.
And if you're one of 20,
yeah,
that immediately will put you on. Now, one man in 20 women would probably feel the same, but that doesn't happen as often, I think. But I can imagine that if you've got this inbuilt kind of, well, you know, just calm down, don't get too excited, you can't be yourself, and you're just even slightly shy, then even if you're on that group, you're not going to have a voice heard anyway, are you?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of issues playing. So one of the suggestions there was, if you're running a leadership meeting,
make sure you allow women to speak.
And ask them if they haven't said anything.
Exactly.
You must have some ideas. Yeah.
And there's a big thing about men tend to speak over the top of women, so it's allowing them.
I disagree. Stop talking.
So if you're sharing a meeting, make sure that everybody gets equal space in the room. You know, to the point.
It sounds obvious, doesn't it?
It does sound obvious, but this is again about that awareness bit. Something else that's interesting that's come out of the launch of the platform is we mentioned earlier about the glass ceiling, and you suggested we perhaps call this for the.
Well, just floating ideas about what we could.
And I kind of winced at that, and again, I won't.
Well, that's one of those terms that makes me, as a man, 43 years in life, go.
But there's also a flip side of that. We've been into big corporates where you've got the behaviour of the company is that it's all about making profit, and that everyone's got to be ambitious and everyone's got to keep moving upwards and upwards and upwards. Yeah. What if you don't want to?
Oh yeah.
There's certain people who don't want to be in a leadership role.
Who are just content.
So there's the opposite of the glass ceiling where they're pushed up, and if they don't want to go into the leadership roles, they're pushed out.
Oh, so that's an interesting dynamic, right? So
and
for some ambitious people, they want to break through. Yeah. But others are just saying, look,
some
I
really
like what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Don't make me. It's like, why not?
Get out.
It's like, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, we've seen that at a big corporate. That absolutely.
So it's like, but why don't you? Why don't you want to be on the board? Well, we need a woman on the board, and you're it. But I don't want it. Right? Well, get out because we need someone. That's interesting. See, again, that's something that I suppose, is a logical step that would be happening, but I would never have put my finger on that.
I went for a role on a board for. I can't say who it is. I'll start again.
Stop with went for a role on a board. Don't go any more detail than that.
I went for a role on a board, and I was told categorically in the room, in the interview, in front of several people, that the reason I was sat in the room was because I was a woman, which absolutely blew me away. And this was 2 years ago.
Well, this is what I've always felt about positive discrimination. Do you really want to be doing a job that you
they justify, they got taken a task and they justified it that they had to hit a certain quota. That's not the point. And it shouldn't have been said. At the level that we were at, it shouldn't have been said.
Because what's interesting is these things are applauded in politics, for instance. I think it was the Labour Party first. I don't want to make this political, but it's like, oh, we're going to have all women's selections for MPs for areas. Why? You're definitely possibly excluding the better candidate. I'm not saying men are the better candidate, but by just saying, right, it's an all-women interview.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Like,
that's not equal. That's not fair, and it's not equal.
But then, it's
a really complex. It's a really complex subject.
I mean, the fact that they've said that is weird, because they're kind of going, we didn't think you were good enough, but you're here anyway. Sorry, we're wasting your time, but we had to have you here. It's like, that's worse, isn't it?
Yeah, it is worse. It's worse. I'd rather, if that was the situation, I'd rather not be there. And the bottom line for that is, do you want to work for an organisation that thinks like that?
Yeah, because then merit has no place in the workplace then. And I do believe in a meritocracy, but the interesting part here is, I think if you're grading how good people are, and I've said this before, but you have to look at making sure those gradings are based on things that can be done equally.
Exactly.
So you can't go, well, Lucy's never turned up in the fundraisers on an evening.
So,
but she can't.
Something I've learned as well through this journey is it's equity rather than equality.
Yeah.
In terms of not everybody's started from the same level field. So if I'm born a white, privileged, middle class woman in the UK, I am not on the same playing field as someone who's from Walker or Biker. Yeah.
it's just the truth, isn't
it's
it?
just the truth. So it's got to be about leveling that out before you get the.
There's a great video that does the rounds, and I think it's more about race, but I think it's like an American college environment where they say, right, we're going to have a 100-meter race. Right, okay then. Right, if you've got two parents at home, take 3 steps forward. Oh.
Yeah.
If both your parents work, takes 2 steps forward. And what you realise is that all of these things are an advantage, statistically proven to be, a better thing to raise a child in I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but to give them a fighting chance. And that's not to say you can't if both parents don't work or if you haven't got two parents, but all of these little things they read out. I don't know if you've seen this video, but then in the end you've got there's some people who have to run 4 meters of a 100-meter race. And there's some poor kids at the back who've had none of these things help them along their way. Well, no wonder they don't win that race.
The one we use is a cartoon of people trying to look over a fence and one person standing on a really high block and the other one standing on the floor.
It's
basically sums it up. Yeah.
So, Lucy, you're speaking to someone who
is converted to the cause.
I mean, there's someone who sits not far from me and we joke each other, women together. But because that was who recommended the book. It was a lady in this office. We had a book club.
Yeah, I would say lady, woman.
Oh, sorry, woman. I thought it was ladies, you and I, and
lady.
ladies and gentlemen. Oh, no.
It's.
Well, I'm in trouble because one of my neighbours is a lady. Officially, that's her title. So
there you go.
But
that's a whole nother podcast.
So I was elevating her to peerage there. That's what I was doing. I wasn't saying it at all anyway. But yeah. So it's what was my point? What the hell was my point?
You were talking about that you have banter with a woman in your office.
So as a kind of a convert, but even though I thought I was quite awake because of this book, I've learned today about this. Well, if you don't want to break the seal,
can I ask you a question? Are you actively going and trying to convert other men?
I've suggested people read the book. I've given the book to men, and I would say I'm doing it in a soft way. I probably should be more open, but I'm doing it in a soft way. So things like the social events, it's I'll put it in the afternoon. And then when men go, why? I go, so everyone can come. So I wouldn't say I was actively I'm not walking around with a drum and a sandwich board on. But I don't know if I've made that decision consciously or not. I don't know. I'm not afraid. Yeah. I don't mind.
Every little helps, and like I say, we're all it's all about progress, isn't it?
But
at least as a minimum, you've started thinking about it.
Well, subconsciously, and maybe I need to think about this more. And this isn't a therapy session. This is meant to be about business. But I wonder if I'm subconsciously thinking, well, I can't just walk around with a placard on saying, "Oh, what about the women?"
And that's probably because you think you'll be.
Well, I'm aware that for the first 43 years of my life, I was one of these ones what the hell are you talking about? Why are you going on about this all the time? So I was one of these ones where I felt like bloody women are just never shut up about what's going because we have to so
we can be heard.
But because I didn't see it, I was like, oh God, you're still going on about this. So I suppose I might be aware that if I was just openly going on about it, it might actually men might stop listening to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not pretending I haven't, until you asked me, I haven't really thought about it.
So this is about starting the conversation so that people think about it more. One of the things that really annoys me is when men say, "Oh, I'm very sympathetic to what you're doing because I've got a daughter." Really, you've got a mother as well.
Well, that's why I said earlier, on the maternity leave. Well, why would you not want your partner to have a better experience and to be able to go back to the same job and not necessarily be 2 years ahead of the career progression because they've had a couple of kids? Well, why would you not want that? But also, I would have wanted my mother to have better treatment when I was coming into the world, and me granny and me aunties and me friends who are female. I'm a work colleague. Why would you not want women to have to not be hindered?
Yeah, and it's a negative that's a positive in that it's about having an emotional connection to it. So and again, that goes back to you have an emotional connection if it's directly affected you, or if someone suggested in the company that you read this book and it's opened your mind up about it.
Because it's interesting you said there. So when we changed our maternity leave kind of guidance to basically improve it. Could it be better? Possibly, but it's way better than it was.
Have you seen an impact on business?
I'll tell you what we've seen. We've seen an impact in people, in that
they're happier.
There was somewhat, and I'm not claiming credit for this. I mentioned it before we started. There was not a lady. There was a woman who was going off on maternity, and we said, "Oh, by the way, we've changed the rules now, and get this. You would have got that. Got this." And she broke down into tears. She's like, "Oh my, that's like going to make my life so much better. Can't believe it. Thank you very much." And I'm not particularly close to this person, but because she works at Robson Laidler, I feel like she's under my responsibility. She's one of us. She's under my wing. And I don't mean that in a possessive way. She's not mine.
Know what you mean.
But why do you not support your people? I think I'm not my people. I'm not trying to trip over anything here, but we're in this as a collective endeavour. There's 100 people here who are trying to all do the same thing. You can only do that if you bring everyone and allow everyone to come with you, I think. And that meant a lot. When I wasn't in the room, when that was fed back to me, I was like, right, we've done something good here. And how can that person not come back to work and be more appreciative?
Exactly.
They have to be, don't they?
Exactly.
And then on the flip side, it's quite weird because I was doing coaching sessions with someone who was a director in a firm, and she kind of said, "Well, I really want to change jobs. I hate my job so passionately. I can't even explain it sometimes." I was like, "But why don't you?" She went, "I probably want to start a family soon." I was like, "Well, what does that matter?" And I was so naive to it. She went, "Because who's going to take me on, looking at I'm a woman of an age, and I haven't got kids yet. I'm almost certainly going to have kids." And she felt like she couldn't move job because of that, which I think is like,
it's tragic.
So what's interesting there is she is now trapped in a job that she goes home in tears over often and can't get out of it.
That's really sad. That brings me nicely on to something I wanted to say, is that having had a couple of businesses, when we were trying to launch this, I was really keen to I was just full steam ahead. One of my mentors says, "Lucy, you're like a snowplow. You just always head down. Sometimes you need to look up." Yeah. And I was desperate to get it launched. I wanted to launch it in March. And there was and I was getting really frustrated because it was taking a long time. I wanted to launch it for International Women's Day, and I had a personal massive turning point in February, because we were interviewing a lot of women to get some feedback about what we were doing. And I was on a Zoom with two women. One woman was telling me a story of something that had happened to her, which was really shocking. Yeah. So I'm taking notes and looking up and going, bloody hell, like quite taken aback by what she's saying. Yeah. And then at one point I looked up, and the other woman on the call was in tears, because what one woman was saying had completely resonated with her. Yeah. And I felt physically sick at the time, but that was a huge turning point in me. I was like, what we're trying to do with this platform is really, really important.
Do you think, so I'm conscious we could probably talk about this all day, and at some point people will not be interested. And because we'll end up talking about very nuanced, niche things. I still don't think that, maybe there are, then, if the research shows, maybe this is the second learning point here. I need to accept that there are just a third of men who are consciously making these decisions, which does surprise me that it's that high. Now that's soaking in, my question's irrelevant, but what I was going to say is, do you still think men actively sit and go, "We'll have a woman on because we should"?
I think certain men do.
We'll interview one.
I think certain men do, absolutely.
How do we change that then?
And I think it's particularly bad in the North East, because we're from a traditional working
I mean, I'm a 50s man.
Exactly,
In most senses,
the man went out to work and the woman stayed at home and did the cooking and the cleaning.
Some women want that, mind you.
I know, that's fine. And some men want that.
She wants that.
And some men want that, and they're blasted for wanting to do that.
Yeah,
so it's about, for me, the key thing I've learned is about listening. It's about language, it's about communication, and it's about listening to what people want and getting different opinions and different perspectives
Making
from people.
assumptions as well is very dangerous.
Yeah, and we all do it. We all do it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. What do you think is the single biggest ignored issue? What's the thing that businesses keep getting wrong on this?
They think everything's all right.
Just that it's that ignorance piece.
It's the ignorant. They think everything's all right. It's 2022, and the amount of times I've had men saying, "What, we're still talking about this? We've got CSR and we've got this and we've got that, and we're equal." Are they? When you scratch beneath the surface, they might think they are, but they're not.
Well, that was me. That was
there
me.
You go.
In this book, which I can't plug enough, honestly.
Yeah. It's a brilliant book.
I don't know how we're going into schools or, certainly...
I think it should be on the curriculum.
Maybe not primary, but certainly secondary level.
It's the teachers, it's getting the teachers to read it, it's getting the heads and then the teachers. And again from...
Actually, that's even better.
Exactly.
Yeah, never mind getting kids to read it.
No, it's getting the head teachers to read it, and then everything that I do, we were talking about this last week, it's got to come from top down. Yeah. So if we want some real changes, it's got to come from government in terms of policy, but within organisations, it's got to come from the leadership.
Can I tell you one thing that we found really interesting? So we're a B Corp. I don't know if you've looked at what B Corp means, but basically we're not just for profit.
It's very trendy at the moment.
Well, it's trendy, but actually it's not just a trendy thing, because you get graded on a whole load of things. And, it's like reducing your waste to the planet and all those things. But also a lot of the questions are, so you have to get a certain score. And to get the score, one of the questions is something along the lines of, I get the wording wrong, but it's do your part-time people have the same benefits and opportunities as your full-time people?
That's brilliant.
So, because there's a lot of workplaces where, you can't join the pension scheme, or you get a different staging date if, there's all these things. And I know there's statutory rules that have superseded.
And like we've talked before, some people might choose to work part-time because they're carers or they have other things.
Exactly. More like to work part-time because you might want to avoid the school runs, so you might do short
or you might be looking
or,
after a sick relative or an elderly relative.
So one thing that is really interesting is when you read these questions and you go, oh yeah, we've got that. Oh no, we haven't got that. Why is that important? And it does make you think, honestly. So the B Corp assessment is something anyone can do, and within that there is a section on your workforce, your employees, I think it's called, of the 5 impact areas. One of them is your workforce. I would actually recommend people go on there and go, why does that score more than that? And you might be surprised, and it might just make people think, oh, well, I didn't realise. Yeah, of course, because there must be a bias on who is part-time versus full-time, and maybe we didn't realise that more women were in the part-time than there were in the full-time.
In one of the sessions, one of the workshop sessions we had, this was a while ago, but a man came up with this idea, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant, to have an online game called How Sexist Is Your Company? And then have a sexistometer going from kind of Sid James and Sid the Sexist at the top, and asking a series of questions. I'd really love somebody to do that. I think it'd be absolutely brilliant.
Right, any budding app developers out there?
But that again, and the questions we were talking about, it was to make people think, isn't it? It's about thinking more about it.
Actually, there's all loads of things. Or your left or right bias politically. There's loads of these things. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like it would be too hard to. You could probably take that B Corp question, the series of questions, because again, they've probably done it for a reason.
I think times are changing, and on a positive note, it'd be really interesting to see what happens with the next generation, because hopefully they're slightly more conscious about the environment, they're more aware about, trans issues, inequality and diversity. Being really interesting to see what happens over the next few years.
My fear on that, Lucy, if I can, I don't want to. You'll have to come up with another positive, because we should end on a positive. But my counter to that is, on the environment, if you look at, say, Greta Thunberg, how many followers has she got on Instagram versus someone like, I don't know,
Kim Kardashian. Yeah.
Kardashian's got like 20 or 30 times the following. I'm not sure the young or as invested in this as you might think.
And on that note, hands up to Kim Kardashian for making big butts popular and trendy,
Well,
which is
easier,
great because
Yeah.
I think body identity's become much more
there's actually
open,
videos now to make your butt bigger, isn't
Exactly. I think that's become on the flip side,
It's
on
weird,
the negative of that, we have created two generations of women who all look exactly the same with the big eyes and the makeup and the Botox and the plastic surgery.
Because actually,
everyone looks
when he's saying,
identical.
hands up for allowing it to be embraced.
It was a trend, wasn't it?
Well, it's now, why have you not got a big butt?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just as bad as, why have you got a big
Exactly.
butt?
But
Yeah,
that's
it's like,
fashion, isn't it? 200
fashion
years
should
ago.
never be body, should it?
Exactly.
Body fashion is
Exactly.
is its own form of toxicity, I think.
The positive is we're on a journey, but there's a long way to go with it all.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, listen, Lucy, that's been fascinating. I've learned a couple of things.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you it's a very difficult subject. So thank you for being open to talk about that.
Platform.
Yeah.
This is a platform.
And I'm
which
learning,
hopefully
and
is
something
helping
I
you.
want to say is I'm learning. I get things wrong all the time. I put my foot in it and say the wrong
Your
things.
brother was telling me, I know. See, honestly, Lucy, it's just, why can't you be more like me? Oh no, your mother said that. Sorry, it wasn't you.
It's about, I keep saying it's about education. It's about being aware of what you're saying and
Do you
doing.
think if more men and women just sat and had this kind of candid conversation, do you think
Absolutely.
there would almost be a value in having like a speed date?
Yeah.
But not dating, like a speed interview, like, did you know, do you think about, this is how I feel? Oh, just didn't realise. I don't know, do you think?
I think it's about just keeping the conversation going and we're trying to shout it from the rooftops at the moment.
And I look forward to the app anyway. Well, I know you've got a background in tech anyway, haven't you?
I want to do this. I think it's brilliant.
What's this?
How sexist is your company?
Well, how sexist is tech?
How sexist is tech? Also, that's interesting. In the research that we've done, the three sectors are tech, which I'm not surprised about, which I think it's a numbers game, and that there's hardly any women doing tech because it's not. It's just a traditionally male-dominated area. So it's tech. The one that I was surprised about was academia. Misogyny and sexism is absolutely rife in academia.
So like, do you mean universities?
Yeah, it's rife.
Research?
Yeah, all of it. And
Schools?
then the third one's professional services, because it's traditionally a male, particularly finance, it's a male-dominated area.
I think that is a timing thing, honestly, for the reasons I said earlier. Like I say, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see the numbers, but it feels like there's a lot more women who are now.
It's not about. I'm talking about misogyny and sexism.
Oh no, I get
rather
that.
than the numbers.
I get that, but I think there will be an inevitable turning point there, because there are just more women in it.
Yeah.
So unless it's going to be like Baldwin's Knicker Factory,
Yeah.
where you got Baldwin and then a bunch of women.
Yeah.
Last time I watched Cora anyway, 25 years ago or whatever it was. I don't think professional services will they can't continue to exist with primarily male-dominated boards and senior levels, because I think there will just be more women coming through.
And I think
it's inevitable.
I think what is inevitably going to happen is it's like a snowball effect. It's going to be, we're going to
probably overcorrect for a while.
Well,
it
might do that.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting, won't it?
Let's see, I'm on the shoes on the other foot. Luckily, I'll hopefully be able to be retired. I won't have to worry about any of this
There's
crap.
a brilliant Frenchman, I can't remember the name of it, but he bangs his head and wakes up and he's a woman, and the whole film's where it's absolutely superb.
Yeah.
I'll have to find the name of it.
Is it got subtitles or is it
Yes,
dubbed?
it's got subtitles.
Ah, calm. Leave me out. Don't send me it. I'm all right. I'm lazy. I like me TV watching and film watching to be easy. Lucy, thank you very much. Honestly,
My pleasure.
It's really good to have these conversations.
Keep my shout out is keep these conversations going and do more of it.
Ask more,
listen more, support more.
And if people need help and support, we'll put the link to All Women Welcome. You're on LinkedIn, you're blogging, there's plenty of content out there. I presume you're happy if people, are you going into workplaces if people ask you to and doing those things?
We've got several different offers, so get in touch.
Good. slightly different episode there. Hopefully it didn't sound like just like activism. The business case.
It is activism, Martin.
No, but the business case is the McKinsey report.
Yeah.
It's not activism for the sake of activism.
Interesting that you should say that, and sorry to interrupt and talking over you like a man would normally do.
Like a classic woman.
Classic woman. For me, the thing that I kept coming back when we've been talking about this, because I've been talking about this for 6 years, is if there's evidence that companies are more profitable because they've got more women across the board, no one can argue with that.
That's the way to a man's heart, isn't it?
That's the way to a man's heart, cash and pies.
Absolutely. Or just cash to buy pies, really.
Cash to buy pies.
Yeah. So listen, we hope you found that interesting. The link to the book should be below. The link to Lucy and finding out more about what they're doing should be below. And don't forget, it's about the money. So
it's all about
I'm
the money.
happy to be called an activist, but I'm actively campaigning to help you make more money here. If it so happens that it helps to make your workplace a better place to be.
Who can argue with that, eh?
2 wins with one point. So thanks very much, Lucy. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.